This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Care Notes with Doug Wilber. And Doug, I'm really excited today because in the beginning, when we were podcasting, you had a guest almost every time. And then we got away from that. But today you have a guest. So tell me what's going on.
Okay. Well, I have what I consider someone who is a good friend within the industry, Arron Stapleton. Arron and I work together on the Home Care Association of America. And Arron is the chapter chair of the state of Ohio. I'm vice chair in the state of Ohio for the Home Care Association of America. He sits on the board nationally with the Home Care Association of America. Now, that is a lot to do just on its own, but he has his own business too. So we're doing the same thing, just in different cities. His city is kind of one of my adopted cities because I'd worked at Procter & Gamble for years. So he's kind of stomping in areas that I know very, very well because of my work at Procter & Gamble. He owns a company in Cincinnati. So I'd like to introduce Arron and, spend maybe a little bit of time finding out a couple of things. One is more about what Arron's doing in Cincinnati, but also some of the things we're doing in the state of Ohio. So that's where we're at. So I'm excited about having a guest as well today. So Arron, we know each other, but the audience doesn't know you. And I'd like to spend a little bit of time for them to be able to get to know you a little bit better. How did you get into this crazy business?
Yeah. Well, first, Doug, thank you so much for inviting me on, and Karen, thank you for having me. Just a little background. So I started in healthcare at a very young age. I started in healthcare whenever I was probably about 13 or 14, unpaid, working at a nursing home. And really, just that was my passion. That was something that really drove me, and worked in healthcare all the way up until I started this business. And at that point, before I started this company, I was working for Medicare skilled home care company in Cincinnati, and really saw what I thought was a need for a higher level of private duty care. So not just sitters and companions, but people who actually understood the diagnosis of their clients and how to properly give care for those individuals. And so I kind of took a leap of faith and started my own company with the backing of the two individuals who own that skilled home care company. And really, I think we have made a name for ourselves here in Cincinnati. And it was kind of easy because we called ourselves Queen City Home Care, which, Cincinnati is known as the Queen City. So we do get confused sometimes with Queen City Sausage, but two completely different companies, right? But seriously, I think my passion and a lot of our employees' passion is about caring for older adults. And because of that, we've really been able to stamp our name in this city and be able to care for a lot of older adults. So it's been a pleasure, and it's something that we're continuously trying to grow in Cincinnati to help as many older adults as we can.
So your passion, because there are different types of people get into home care, and it sounds like yours really came out of a heart type of thing. Like you really loved a certain part of this. If you're doing this when you're 14 or when you're younger, what was it that attracted you? How did you kind of get involved at that point in time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would probably say that there was just an ease of communicating with older adults for me. I always felt that they had a lot of knowledge, a lot of education, and I'm a person who just soaks up knowledge. I love it. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times our society as a whole kind of looks at our older population as being finished with whatever they had to do. And so
Right.
we kind of saw that. I saw that as being put in the corner, but you're wasting a lot of education. And so for me, I really enjoyed and still do having conversations with older adults and getting to know their stories and letting them have that outlet, because a lot of times they aren't able to give that outlet anymore. Their families have heard their stories multiple times, and a lot of people are in a hurry. But I think whenever we slow down and we take an opportunity to listen, we can learn a lot. And that's just been something that I think kind of God has blessed me with, that I've been able to, really it hits me very deeply to be able to engage with our older population. And I think that that's part of the reason why it was easy for me at 14 to do that. And it's one of the things that I love to do even today. And so whenever I get stuck inside these four walls, I get a little antsy, because a lot of me wants to be out and wants to be engaged with, with our clients.
Yeah. Are you still able to do that a lot? A lot of times as people grow, it becomes harder and harder to engage. Or have you been able to figure out a way to do it one way or another in the process, so you're remaining with that thing that you loved? Sometimes we kind of work ourselves out of the things that we love, and it can be really frustrating for some folks.
Yeah. And it is tough, right? And I think especially in a pandemic, I mean, that was the big thing that halted it. Outside of actual caregivers, supervisors like myself, we weren't able to go into facilities or even households. A lot of people were like, look, the caregivers are fine, but I'd rather not have any more people in than I would like. And then it kind of got to be a little bit better. And really what I found is I have to put it on my calendar. Like if I don't put it in my schedule, it doesn't happen. So it's extremely important to me that twice a month I have it scheduled for 4-hour blocks where I get out of the office and I'm going to people's homes and I get to engage and interact with them. And, even something small for me, birthdays are a big deal. And so whenever I have, that somebody's birthday, I'm going to go out and get them something and drop it off. And even something small like that means so much to them. And I think it also means something to me. It builds into just that appreciation for life, really. And so again, a lot of it is just making sure that you're putting it on your calendar, because so many times we get so busy and the day gets, we look and we're like, oh, the day's gone.
Right.
So if we don't put time away for it, it's not going to happen. And so it is a priority of mine. So it goes on my calendar every month. Yep.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah. Now, so often, I remember talking to someone one time, and they said that, there are a number of different agencies within an area, and the context, I won't go into it, but they were essentially saying that a lot of times agencies within an area, even though they're, quote, competitors, really aren't competitors, because they're really dealing with different parts of the market. The need is high. They're dealing with different things. So do you have a niche that you really go for? For example, are you more oriented towards facilities, or are you more oriented towards the actual home? What is your niche within that Cincinnati market, if there was one?
Yeah, I would go back to just that higher level of care, right? So again, we don't have typically our clients come to us whenever there is that start of at least 2 of the 6 activities of daily living. So there's hands-on care for that, those bathing, feeding, dressing type of tasks.
So
And
you're
then,
not primarily companionship type of thing. It's
No.
really when they're having more needs. Yeah.
Yeah. And then really, I mean, I think that's where we start, but then where we kind of shine is towards, it's kind of tough to say, but towards that end of life care. There have been plenty of times where hospice has been able to come in with 24-hour care, and our families have said, we'd rather have your caregivers in there because they know mom or dad, right? And they know how to care for them. Now, then you get into the whole, how do they receive medication? And that's a whole other rigmarole. But for us, if we're able to care for somebody bedside, if we're able to see them through that process, it really means a lot to us. So we're able a lot of times to go higher level because of who we hire on. We're hiring on those state tested nursing assistants who have been in facilities and nursing homes for multiple years. So they've cared for these clients before, and it's a little bit easier because they're doing it in a one-on-one situation. So I would say that that's kind of our niche, is we're able to stay with you longer in your home setting, wherever that is.
Right. Yeah. And then, obviously there's a lot of companies that do what we do. You're kind of in, the unique setting like I am, and that we've chosen not to go down the path of doing the franchise route and to be truly independent, which has its own challenges, but also I think has its really strong benefits and not benefits just for us, but really benefits for our clients. I think there are some really, really strong reasons why that is the right way to go in many situations for the receiver of the care. But at some point in time, obviously something triggered within you, as well as it did within me, that we should be involved in the Home Care Association of America at a state level. And I really want to spend some time today both talking about what drew you into, like, I got to have some involvement in this, but also some of the victories that we've had in the state of Ohio. And we've had some unique victories we can go into, but go into a little bit about why you got involved in the Home Care Association.
Yeah. So for me, whenever I started Queen City Home Care, I sat down and I wrote my goals, right? And that were, the 1 year, probably the day one goal, right? To open the door. But the 1 year, 5 year, 10-year goals. And part of those goals were not just Queen City Home Care specific, they were industry, right? How am I able to shape the industry? How am I able to, and again, this is day one. So for me, it was important that that there was not just a change in my company, in my community, but also the state and maybe even the country, right? And I think if you're willing to dream big, big things happen. And so for me, it was extremely important that I wasn't just thinking about myself and my company, that I was thinking about our industry. And I saw 10 years ago what really was the wild, wild west. I mean, it was kind of, somebody told me that, and this was probably 5 to 7 years ago, that private duty home care was where assisted living was 25 years ago, right? And they were considered the wild, wild west. And it was just kind of anything goes, and you make up your own rules. And so a lot of that comes with you know, however you want to explain it, you know, a black eye, or it only takes a couple instances for the entire industry to get a bad name. And I think the majority of us are really in this to help people, right? And I think there are even some examples of people just doing the wrong thing because they don't know any better. And so for me, this was just an opportunity of how do I get involved to make a change. And the Home Care Association of America was a great opportunity because they had a national voice, but they were looking to have voices in each individual state. And I think that's where, you know, luckily you and I were able to meet and sit down, and we had a lot of parallel visions of how are we able to better our industry, right? And not make it so burdensome where, you know, there are some states that, you know, it's just like, oh, why did we do this, right? But how are we able to make our own voice and be heard? And that's really why I joined HCOA, because I felt like they already had a voice and they were able to almost point us in the right direction on how to have the loudest voice in the state.
Right. Yeah. You know, and this is one of the things that it's interesting because that usually in any industry, there are a few bad players that will create issues for others, and that the majority of people are doing the right things and following the rules and doing things the right way. But then you'll have a group that will, well, not even a group, but individuals that are within that group that will create big problems. And I don't care if it's our industry or if it's in any industry, that's the case. And I think the dilemma that I had, and probably, you know, just with our conversations that you had, which is, you know, if there's a need for regulations to be able to do things in such a way that the bad players are at least minimized, that the issues that they could create are minimized without having such egregious regulations that you end up saying, like you said, like, why are we doing this? Why did we do this? Why did we set this monster loose on ourselves? And you know, in the state of Ohio, there was no regulation on home care, and if it was through other means, but it was not, because there is an acknowledgement that there is this thing called home care, and we recognize it, and here are the people that are involved in it, and here are some simple rules around being able to interact. And most people didn't realize that. So I would get people say, well, do you have a license? And I'd have to say to them, there is no license. There is no license in the state of Ohio. That's why it's really important for you to do your homework and try to get the right people in place. And I think you and I, you know, saw a very similar thing. It's actually funny because how you mentioned how you had kind of that vision early on, the impact that you could have. I felt very strongly the same way, that this was an opportunity, because of the newness of the industry, to have an outside influence on the shape and the direction of the whole industry for years to come, you know, possibly for 50, 60, 70 years, if you are able, and I am able, to set things up in the right way, you know, to get those things down right, and to be an example, and to set the tone for the whole industry. So it's funny that we had a very similar type of vision, and that we ended up both, you know, in the leadership positions in the state of Ohio. So you and I both saw the need, the problem, and even not. And Arron and I have kind of gone back and forth about things about how much regulation is the right regulation, right? In our conversations.
Yeah.
But something's happened this last year, which is, we were going back and forth and trying to make, decisions on it. And we ended up being able to get in the state of Ohio some regulation. So we are now officially a licensure state. So talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah, I think it's funny because it seems like it happened very quickly, right? And in some manner it did, but I also remember, almost 4 years ago, you and I, talking about the need for this and how do we position ourselves and how do we move forward. And so it was like, this flower that had so much work under the ground that you didn't see, and then all of a sudden, like it popped up and bloomed at the same time, and you were just like, oh, it's here, right?
Right.
And so, I think really a lot of that discussion that you and I had and our committee had to talk about how we wanted to move forward and in what ways certain things should be verbalized, and it's funny how much the word and so, or but and is, or one little word can change so much whenever you're talking about legal terms, right? And just looking at things like that and getting it pushed through, I think was great. And the funny thing is that right now is when the work is really getting done, right? Because all the meat is going to be formed. It's we're putting together now, between now and June of 22, what this is actually going to look like. And so I think while it's very important that we are now officially a licensure state, the next 9 months are extremely important, that we are sitting with the people in Columbus to say, hey, here are some things that we think need to be in it. Here are some things that probably might be a little too much, or and we just want to be at the table, right? And that's been kind of our motto over the past few years, is we just want to be at the table. And I think this pandemic is as much negativity that can go into a pandemic is some of the bright spots that we have seen is the need for us to be a licensure state. So there is definition as to what our industry is and what we are and are not a part of. The fact that we had to fight for our employees to be essential workers is just crazy to me. I mean,
oh yeah, it's nuts.
I mean, the fact that we had some people in Ohio actually get turned away by the police and say, no, you have to go back home because you're not essential, and you caring for an older adult in their home is not an essential task, it just boggles my mind. And I think if we're able to be in this, in this licensure state and have some definition, that won't happen again, right? And so I kind of got off the topic a little bit, but you can kind of tell how much passion goes behind this, because the work that our employees do is so important, and it is something that is essential. If our employees were not caring for these older adults, there would have been so much worse numbers than
right.
than what we had. And so I just think that this next 9 months is important for us to work with the people in Columbus, but also to make sure that everybody understands that's in our industry that, we want this to be an educational opportunity. We don't want this to be a, going around, smacking people's knuckles with rulers. For those of you who went to Catholic grade school a while ago, right? We want this to be an educational thing where we can rise up the industry, that the people who don't know what the rules are or should be can now be given some level of a pathway to, okay, here's how to properly care for older adults. And I think that's what the next 9 months is going to hold.
Well, and just, kind of piggybacking on some of the things you said, I remember when COVID first came out and they were talking about doing closing things up. And you were talking about people getting turned away and different things at the time. And I remember hearing that there is a good chance that there was going to be this shutdown and that there might be some really big implications to it. And that this whole idea around essential workers, well, because we weren't licensed and there wasn't a licensure path in the state of Ohio, that was kind of, there was no real recognition of what we were doing, and so we were kind of just unknown. And I remember getting on the phone with the executive director, Vicki, of the National Home Care Association of America, and saying, Vicki, we got a problem. I said, can we get some sort of a letter or, out to folks? Because if they shut things down, we need to be able to send this out to to people throughout the country, but specifically in the state of Ohio, so that we can actually, be able to get into places. And if they're stopped by the police, at that time, and we didn't really know how things were going to be panning out in that situation. And this is the nice thing about having concern and being able to be connected like that, because within, I would say, an hour or two, Vicki had gotten that letter out to the whole nation, and we were then armed with being able to do it. But it was crazy enough that it took a phone call to be able to say there's this need to be able to get something like that, so that in Ohio we weren't going to get blocked, or in other states, because there are a number of states around the country that don't have licensure either in this. Well, one of the kind of untold stories of this is that, we were working on this, and there was a parallel group that was also working on getting it through. And there was a group of legislatures who also were interested in this, who had seen some reports of, like, I think it was embezzlement that had happened with a home care agency worker that had embezzled someone's money, a lot of money from the individual. And so the legislator then said, hey, there's a need to do something. So kind of all the forces came together and started putting together the legislation. Actually, by the time we found out where it was in place, we were able to give input and stuff like that was able to, I believe, make a difference in the final language that I feel like benefited the healthcare consumers, or the consumers of our care throughout the state. So, but kind of getting into that thing that you said before, which is shaping things. Maybe in a way it's appropriate that you get mixed up with sausage making, because legislature, they say, is a lot like baking sausage.
Yeah.
You don't want to watch it happening because it's not a very pleasant thing, but
Yep.
you're glad that the results are there. But the funny thing is that the legislation is in many ways very open. I mean, they're saying this is what we need to do, and then it goes to more bureaucracies that you know, we won't use bureaucracies, we'll use regulatory bodies, okay? But the regulatory bodies are the ones that kind of start saying, what do we need to do now with this general information? So go into a little bit about that part of it, because I think that is interesting for our audience.
Yeah, and I will say this. I didn't realize that it worked this way, right? I was under the impression that a bill was passed and that, it was on the books and there it is, right? And so this has been a learning opportunity for me as well, to understand that a lot of times these bills are passed and they're pretty ambiguous as a whole, and then they're passed down to certain bodies. I believe ours is in the Health and Human Services, and the person who's in charge of that really gets to take this piece of clay and mold it, right? And this is where it's important for associations like ours and the Ohio Council, for us to have our voices heard, because I believe that whenever you have someone whose job it is to make the rules, if they're not taking the information from the people who are living it day to day, then you can just go based on what you think or what you've heard. The outliers are, and sometimes that can harm the companies and the people that work for them, and even the clients. You can be trying to do something well for someone and maybe overregulate to where you're harming them, right? And so that's where it's our job now to sit down up until the timeline in June of 22. It's our job to sit down with the person who oversees this Health and Human Services and to talk to them about their direction, where they would like to go, and the things that we believe should and should not be in these regulations. Again, I kind of mentioned it before. We want this to be, and we hope that Health and Human Services want it to be this way as well. We want it to be an educational opportunity. We want it to be more than a regulatory, you're doing this wrong. Whenever you have an audit, it's this sweating bullets. We want people to understand that, we're going to have to grow as an industry, right? This is going to help us to grow as an industry, to be better. And so we want to make sure that whatever regulations that are put in place, whatever that is decided to come down, we want these to be opportunities for mediocre companies to get better, right? And better companies to become great. And really, that's what we're hoping for whenever we sit down with the leader of this group, to really hear our concerns, hear our voices, because I don't think that there are too many people who are in our industry that are against regulation, but they are against constriction, right? Not being able to run our businesses the best way that we can to help the most people, and that includes our employees as well. So we just want to be able to have our voices heard, so we can be a part of that process.
Well, I would say, one thing that I can say is very unique about us as a group, Home Care Association America, and even the Ohio Council on Home Care and Hospice, that the fact is that we sought this out, and we wanted this, we invited this, and we really were trying to sponsor that this happened. And very rarely will you ever find a group that says, yeah, we want you to do this because we want to have consumer protections. We want to protect the people that we feel are very vulnerable with legislation that will help to get some of the people that maybe aren't doing things right to get it right, as you were saying, and to maybe push out the people who are truly the bad players and who have bad intent. And there aren't many people like that. But, there's probably more of the group that, aren't doing it well, that need a little bit push in that direction than there are the people that are doing it because they are just not really good people, and have bad intent. But I do think that there are some things that you can say that about our industry that is unique. That's very different. And from a national standpoint, that's been a big thing nationally for the Home Care Association from the beginning, is trying to get this through for the consumer protection part of it, to really have standards. I mean, Home Care Association is all about standards, that they are an employee-based model, that there are things that you have to agree to if you're a part of the association, that really are around standards. The fear, and this is what I think you had hit on a little bit before, is, that sometimes regulators don't understand an industry. So they go with stuff that they can measure, but isn't necessarily the measures that really indicate quality. It's measures that indicate that they can measure it.
Mhm.
And that it's easy and they can slap. So that's what you worry. And that's where I think our involvement over the next, year is going to have such a big impact, because what we're hoping to do, as Arron and I have talked about, is get it that the measures are the right measures, that's the right thing. So, I would say that, to the audience is, let us know, we're representing not only our members, but we're also representing our clients when we're trying to get this stuff through. So any information that you can get to us, we want to know. We're sponges, in this. Yeah. So Karen, I know you had personal experience with your mom.
Right.
And some of it wasn't really good. And, I'd like to kind of maybe wrap up a little bit with why this was a good thing.
Well,
Um,
I'm really excited about this as a consumer. In addition to my mom, about 2 weeks ago, I did a podcast with a young man who was given the responsibility of taking care of his grandmother. Um, Family is very busy, and they thought he had extra time, and you go find home care. He flew her up from out of state, had no idea what he was doing, but he asked around in the community and he was told, oh, here's an agency. And he hired the agency, but he didn't know what questions to ask. And when they came in to do their interview, which I went through for my mom, and I know, Doug, you're always out and about working with families, they didn't ask him a fraction of the questions that I was asked. And they just said, we'll send these, caregivers out to be with your grandmother. And the problem was that sometimes two would show up and sometimes no one would show up. And which is a really bad experience. And so he had to fire them. And in the middle of it, it was like, what do I do? Where do I go? And so we talked quite a bit about it. And first of all, I said, you're only 21 years old. Why did the family put this all on you? You've got to go
right.
back to family, first of all, and get a little bit more help. And we made a couple of suggestions, but again, I told him they were suggestions based on what I had been through. And I said, you have to go out and interview home care companies. It's not so much them interviewing you, you need to interview them first. And I like the fact of regulations because in Michigan, there were no regulations. And sometimes we had somebody come in who didn't even know how to turn my mother. And it was like, what are you here for? I mean, I can do it then. I don't need you. Um, and some people thought I was crazy that I wanted those regulations. They said, do you want somebody to come in and say, this is all I can do? I said, yes, because if I know this is all you can do, I now can go back to you, Doug, or you, Arron, and say, okay, we need more help in these areas. Who can we bring in? And I'm assuming that's part of what those regulations are going to identify, what the caregivers can do, can't do, the training they need. And training, we all need to be trained. Come on.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that the experiences that so many people have had has been kind of negative and bad, and I Arron, I think you'd probably agree with me that this is not going to be the magic bullet from that, because sometimes that just comes down to running a business well, because there's a lot of things that are highly regulated and you still have bad experiences when you go and in that industry. So that's not going to be the key thing, but I think there are critical things that can be defined, to your point, that will prevent the worst of things from happening, and then pushing an industry higher and higher to the potential that I think it should be, and hopefully without a lot of stupid regulations. So we'll work on trying to prevent the stupid regulations, right, Arron?
Yeah. Well, and that's it. But I think that's the thing is again, if people don't speak up, then they're not heard, right? And so if people like Doug and myself and other owners and people who are running companies like this, if they're not going to speak up and say, look, this is what's needed, but here are some things that really aren't going to help us at all as an industry, then we're not able to get any better. So I think, Doug, what you were talking about before is anybody that's listening to this, and even if you're not in Ohio, find out who is running your state agency, your association, and talk to them about it. If you are in Ohio, talk to Doug, to myself, look up the Home Care Association of America, or the Ohio Council. It's important that that you talk to someone, because that's how your voice gets heard. And the more people that are talking, the louder voice there is, and you're able to shape things and move things in the direction that it needs to go. And so, I think we're living proof of that. We have seen that over, really over the past year, but really Doug and I have seen that over the past 4 years and also in the amount of people who have wanted to join the HCOA, that's wanted to join us because they've seen that a group's voice is important and it is heard.
Yeah. Well, with that, I really am glad that you joined us today, Arron, on Care Notes. I appreciate you taking the time out, and I really appreciate all the work you've done. The stuff that we're doing with the Home Care Association is not paid. So, this is just because we care about people, we care about the folks that we serve, and we want to make sure that they're getting served well. I'll tell you one thing, that there's no one more upset about a bad apple than those of us who are doing the right things, because you just kind of think, oh, I don't want to be associated with it, and we've heard the stories. So thank you, Arron, for not being associated with that.
Well, thank
and
you,
being-
Doug. And it really has been a pleasure to work with you. I mean, I think in our industry, it's important for us to reach out to, like-minded individuals who it is important to, do what's right, not only for your company, but for your industry. So it's been a pleasure. And I look forward to the work that we're going to be doing over the next year.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you. And you take care.
Thanks.
And to all your listeners, Doug and Arron, one important thing, we're all going to need home health care at some time in our life, if not for ourselves, for a family member. So if you have any ideas, I will make sure that your emails are associated with this show notes, and let's all work together. Have a
Thank you.
great day.
All
Bye-bye
right.
now.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.